polls and they vote, right? It's super important, right? And the reason is because this, let's just talk about this district for a minute, District 13. When I got those extra bodies from Texas 26, one of the reasons I got them was because they wanted to make Dr. Burgess's district a little redder so that he, and obviously he's not running now, but whoever, is running that district will have an easier time being elected as a Republican. That's part of what redistricting is, for Republicans and Democrats. If you control the legislature, you get to make these decisions as long as you're not, breaking laws and gerrymandering, which they weren't. But so they did, they made everybody around me redder and they made me bluer. But one of the reasons this happened too was because when the census came out and they're looking at the census numbers, the district that I'm in, Texas 13, which is very rural, right? It's all of the Texas Panhandle, everything along the Red River, about 3 counties deep, now down into Denton. So it's a huge district, like I said, roughly 42,000 square miles. But it's very rural. But what happened in my district over the last 10 years with the last census is that the population precipitously dropped, right? My district had lost about 200 and something thousand voters, whereas Dr. Burgess's district had gained an extra 250,000, right? So they had to give me part of this area because, not just because they were trying to shift the red-blue thing, but they were trying to fix the population issue related to the census. But here's the issue. The number one area in the entire United States that's growing faster than anywhere else in the United States is north of Dallas. It's number one right now. It's booming, right? And that's good in a lot of ways, but it's not good in a lot of ways because a lot of the people that are coming here are coming from California and Florida and Colorado and other places where they're sick of what's happened in their state. They're coming here. Some of them have had their eyes opened and they're not going to they're going to vote Republican, or they're not going to destroy this state the way they destroyed the state they came from. But a lot of them, believe it or not, oddly enough, they come here and they bring their politics with them, right? So this district over the next 10 years is going to continuously get bluer and bluer and bluer. And that's because this is where the population growth is, not out far west where everybody's super red. It's still shrinking there. Rural America is still shrinking. And this, the suburbs and urban America, that's where the population growth is, right? So anyways, my point is that we have to make sure that we get out and vote and that we overcome that by, just basically being motivated to vote when a lot of these people aren't going to be motivated to vote, that we keep this district red. But even more importantly than that, for the foreseeable future, this district will have a Republican representing them. I hope it's me. Obviously, I'm running again, and I hope you guys all, feel inclined to get out and vote for me. But it's going to be a Republican because we're still pretty red overall, right? Very red overall. But that's not the case for the whole state, right? And I remember when I first started running, before I got elected, I was running that 1 year between the time I got out of the Navy and the time I started running. President Trump called me one day and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to Texas and I'm going to Midland, Texas. Do you want to come with me?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I met him at Andrews Air Force Base, jumped on Air Force One, and we flew to Midland, and Ted Cruz was on the plane with us, right? So I'm in the conference room talking to Ted Cruz. And I was asking him a little bit about advice because I'd never been a politician before, never ran for office, and we're talking about it. And he told me, he said, "Ronny," he said, "I would not be in the Senate today without your district," right? And he said, "Without your district, Jody Arrington's district, which is 19, which is Lubbock and Levelland, where I grew up, just south of our district now, and August Pfluger's district, which is Texas 11, the Midland area. Those 3 districts, we have 36 or 38 districts now, because we got picked up 2 in the census. 38 districts in the state of Texas right now, right? And those 3 districts are the number one reason, the main reason, maybe the only reason that Texas is still red. And that's because, and this is what Cruz told me. He said, "Ronny," he said, "when I was running," this is referencing his election against Beto, remember back then, he said, "I would have lost that election. Beto would have beat me if it had not been for your district." And he said, "I got criticized because I was doing events." He goes, "I remember I went and I did an event in Pampa, Texas, right? And he said, my staff was asking me, why are we doing an event in Pampa, Texas? This is crazy. Everybody in Pampa is going to vote for us, right?" He said, "But The issue is voter turnout in your district. He goes, you had massive voter turnout in your district because they were enthusiastic. And he goes, every time somebody votes in Texas 13, it takes a vote away from the Democrats in Harris County or in Travis County or in Dallas County, right? Where there's overwhelming number of Democrats. So the only reason that they don't win these elections because they're getting out is because people in our district and people in the two other districts that are in West Texas come out and vote, and they keep Texas red. So it's super important to get out and vote, in this next election and bring as many people as you can. I mean, we are the firewall for the state of Texas. We really are. And we need to be proud of that, but we need to make sure that we're working to maintain that. So anyways, I'm going to tell you real quickly just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Levelland, Texas, as I mentioned. I didn't grow up with money at all. My dad's an electrician. My mom's a homemaker, blue-collar, hard-working blue-collar family. I don't know how many of you have been to Levelland before. But Levelland there's only two things in Levelland, just two. There's cotton and oil, and that's it. There's nothing else there. There's no trees, there's no water, there's nothing. Just cotton and oil, that's it. So I grew up in the oil field. I was a roustabout in the oil field. My dad was a pumper. My brother worked in an oil field supply company. Oil and gas put food on the table for us. But everybody I went to school with were cotton farmers. I mean, so it was farmers and oil field folks. So anyways, that's where I grew up. I ended up, it's a long story, but I ended up going to school at Texas A&M. Gig 'em. But went to school at Texas A&M and finished there and ended up actually going to Texas A&M at Galveston at the end because I was a marine biology major and changed my major to marine biology. Finished there and thought I was going to be a marine biologist, but at the last minute decided I want to go to medical school. University of Texas Medical Branch, which is the original medical school for the University of Texas, and the biggest one is there in Galveston, right across the bridge from Texas A&M at Galveston. So I got a job working over there to make a little extra money, and I asked him, I said, you know what, I need to get a job. I met my wife there. Her dad was an Army cardiothoracic surgeon. He'd been he had one big fault. I mean, he thought every time he transferred to a new duty station, he was supposed to get assigned a new Army nurse as a wife, right? That was his main flaw. He's a good guy, but anyways, he was married 4 times. And so he and Jane's mom divorced when she was 10 years old, and they lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, because he worked at Walter Reed at the Army Medical Center there, right? And so he came to Texas. And ended up in San Antonio, got married again, ended up in Corpus Christi, so on and so forth. And so when she got ready to go to college, my wife Jane, we've been married 31 years, he talked her into coming to Texas to just knock out some of her basics, and she could get in-state tuition here because he lived here. So she came and she ended up going to Texas A&M. He was in Galveston at the time, working as a pathologist / surgeon there. And so she shows up in Galveston at Texas A&M at Galveston as a freshman, and I was a incoming junior, and I was her RA, and I checked her into her room. That's how we met. But when I met her, I needed a little extra money. I was still making ends meet. I was going home on Christmas break, spring break, summer break. Anytime I had more than 2 or 3 days off, I was back home in the oil field trying to make money for books, tuition, and fees for the next semester. But I wasn't, I was making ends meet. But now I was wanting to go out and entertain her. I didn't have quite enough money, so I went to the University of Texas Medical Branch over there and asked them. I said, "Hey, when I'm not in school or when I'm not in class, do you guys have anything I can do to make a little extra money?" And they said, "Well, we have some work-study programs. The med students aren't taking advantage of it. Let us look into it." So I said, "Okay." A couple days, they called me back later, and they're like, "Hey, we got a job for you, right? We found something for you to do. You're going to be working in the pathology department." And I said, "Okay, cool." And they said, "You're going to be an autopsy assistant." I was like, "What?" I was like, "Autopsy assistant, right?" I thought I was going to be working in a biology lab or chemistry lab or something like that, right? So anyways, I said, "Okay, I'll do it. That's fine." Well, I never thought about going to med school, but what happened is they started teaching me a little bit. The path resident. My job was to, not to be too gross, but my job was to open the body up and take all the organs out, and open the skull up, take the brain out, pass everything down to the end of the table to the path residents, the pathology residents. They'd dissect everything out and figure out why the person died, right? And then when it was all over, I'd put everything in buckets and sew everything up and, finish everything. That was my job. But these guys started teaching me stuff. They were like, "Hey, you remember that liver that we had yesterday?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Well, come look at this one. This guy's got liver cancer. See the difference?" And they just started teaching me, and I got interested in medicine. So I thought, I think I might want to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to be a pathologist, but I'd been a firefighter and stuff. So I said, I want to be an ER doc, right? So I just out of nowhere decided I want to go to med school. I scrambled. I took the MCAT. I ended up, doing okay. I got into school at university, but I didn't have any money to pay for it, right? So I had already reached out to the military because I can't go home and work in the oil field on Christmas break and make enough money to pay for med school. And I wasn't about to leave with $200,000, $300,000 in debt like everybody else does. So I said, you know what? I'm going to reach out to the military and see if they have anything that that's available. And I was in the Corps my first year at A&M, so I thought, well, I got a little bit of an attachment there. So I did. They said, yeah, we got this scholarship program. You can apply for it. If you get it, we'll pay for all your med school, and you just owe us time after you get out. So I applied for it, I got it. I went to medical school at the University of Texas on Navy scholarship. They paid for my books, my tuition, my fees, gave me a stipend to live on every month. I saved my money. When I got out, I actually had money in the bank, whereas everybody else owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had several $100s or more just in my, I had several $1,000s I'd saved up in my account, right? So it worked out pretty well. And all I owed the Navy was 4 years. It was year for year. So I owed them 4 years of service. So I got out, I thought I was going to do my 4 years, do my 4 years in the Navy, get out, come back home to Texas, be a rich emergency medicine doc or whatever, I didn't know. But that's my plan. But when I got in, I realized I loved the service to my country, but I loved my job. I had an awesome job. Because when I got in the Navy, the first thing I found out about was this thing called the Undersea Medicine Program. So I applied for it. I got it right away. So as soon as I got in the Navy, they sent me straight to Panama City, Florida, put me completely through Navy dive school, and I became a Navy deep sea diver. So I was a Navy deep sea diver, and I was a doctor, right? So for the next 5 or 6 years, they preferentially assigned me to diving units. So I was with explosive ordnance disposal teams, underwater demolition teams, underwater salvage teams, and with Navy SEALs. And that's what I did for like 5 or 6 years. And I spent my whole day jumping out of airplanes, fast jumping out of helicopters, locking out of submarines with the SEALs, blowing stuff up, shooting all kinds of weapons. It was like being 10 years old and getting a paycheck, right? So I loved it. I ended up like, my 4 years came, my 4 years went. I never thought about getting out of the Navy, so I just stayed in. So I ended up staying in for 25 years, right? And 25 years on active duty. 4 years in the reserve during med school, 25 years on active duty, so a total of 29 years in the military. Retired as a Navy Rear Admiral when I left. But when I finished my time as a diving doctor, I realized I had to go and I had to get board certified in something to keep getting promoted. So I went back to Naval Hospital Portsmouth, got trained as an emergency medicine doc, did a residency in emergency medicine, finished that. And it was 2004, 2005. It was 2004 when I graduated, so 2004, 2005 time frame. Right then, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan were pretty hot and heavy. And if you were a board-certified Navy emergency medicine physician in 2005, you belonged to the United States Marine Corps, right? Because that's where they needed us. So anyways, I did my 3 years, and at the end of that 3 years, I was supposed to move on at the end of the Bush administration, go somewhere else, but there was a lot of turnover. All of these guys left or retired. So I went from being the most junior guy to the most senior guy kind of overnight. And the Pentagon decided, you know what, that's too much turnover for the White House Medical Unit. We want you to stay. So they asked me, will you stay and be the director of the White House Medical Unit? I said, yeah. So they extended me for a couple years. I was the director of the White House Medical Unit. I was on active duty at the White House. And I was a physician for Bush, Obama, and Trump. And I ended up leaving the White House after the 3rd year of the Trump administration because I was running for office. So I left in December 1st, 2019, and I left 2 days before the filing deadline to run for this office in 2013. I went straight to Austin, filed 2 hours before the filing deadline, and there were 15 people in the race, and luckily I squeaked into the runoff, and then I just crushed the guy in the runoff and won. But I ended up, and that's how I ended up in Congress. But I'll tell you guys this, I never really thought, I told you I never thought about coming into Congress. It never crossed my mind. I never thought about being a politician. It's not something I ever aspired to do, ever thought about really. But I don't know if you guys remember or not, when I left, I was going to leave at the end of the Obama administration because I'd already been promoted to Navy Admiral, right? I already had over 20 years in, so I was retirement eligible. I kind of maxed out rank-wise. I was a Rear Admiral, kind of maxed out rank-wise. So I thought, I don't want to stay in anymore. I'm going to get out. I want to go home to Texas. I want to find a job. I'd been, on military salary my whole life, and like I said, I didn't grow up with money, but I felt like I had an opportunity to get out, sit on some boards, do some consulting, not work very much, and make, 10 times what I was making in the military. So everything was good. My wife was excited about it. She was already looking at houses, back in Texas. She was all fired up. And then I had a phone call one day, 2 weeks before inauguration, and it was the transition team for President Trump. And it just turns out that the transition team for Trump were all Bush folks, right? Because Trump didn't know anything about setting up the West Wing of the White House or picking his cabinet. And he didn't know anything about that. He wasn't a politician, right? And so They did the same thing that everybody does. They reached out to the last group from the same party, the last administration from the same party, and got them to help them, which was the Bush administration. So all of the folks on the Trump transition team, for the most part, were Bush folks. And they knew me from the Bush years. I'd taken care of them and their families for a few years, right? And so when they found out I was still there, they called me up and they said, hey, you can't leave, you need to stay. And I'm like, no, I'm not staying. I was like, I'm getting out, right? I didn't even know Trump at the time, right? I was like, no, I'm out. And they're like, no, you need to stay. We have all these issues. We have 1,000 things going on. The White House medical unit's hitting on all cylinders. Just take it off our plate, please. It's just one less thing we have to worry about. They didn't like the guy who was taking my place either. I'd picked him, but he was kind of an introvert, and he and Trump weren't getting along. Like, Trump didn't dislike him, but the guy didn't say anything. He just stood by the wall, and Trump was like, what's up with this guy? He never says anything, right? It's just no, so they're like, this ain't going to work. So anyways, he was a good guy. But anyways, so they basically said, you got to stay, man. And so they talked me into it eventually. And I said, look, I'll stay for 6 months. I'm not staying a day later. I'll find somebody to take my place that you guys are comfortable with. I'll do a turnover with them, but I'm leaving. 6 months and I'm out, right? And they said, okay. But then what happened is Trump came in and I got to know Trump, right? And I didn't know him at all, but I figured I got to get to know this guy. So my office in the White House was directly below his bedroom, right? I'm the only one who has an office in the White House. Everybody else's office is in the West Wing, the East Wing, or in, Eisenhower Executive Office building or something like that. My office is in the White House proper, right below his bedroom. So the elevator that comes down from his bedroom is right across from the door going into my office. So I thought, I've been there long enough, I know how to get to know him, right? So I got an earpiece in, I'm listening to everything they're doing, they call out every movement he makes, the Secret Service does, right? They use their code names, right? Like Bush was Trailblazer, Obama was Renegade, and Trump was Mogul, right? So they're calling it out, so they're like, mogul this, mogul that. When they move from one room to another, Secret Service calls it out on the radio. So I'd get to work before Trump came downstairs, right? Now I didn't get to work before Trump got up because, as you know, he sleeps like 4 or 5 hours a night, right? And he was up like 3 hours before anybody else even showed up at the White House. He used to tell me that, like he wants everybody to know he's up, he's working, right? And so he would get up in the morning, he would go over to the side that faces like the press Pebble Beach area, and he would flash the light off and on so they knew he was like awake, right? Just to let them know I'm up, right? Are you up? It's 5 in the morning. I'm up. I'm working, right? But so he would be upstairs, listening to, watching TV, tweeting, whatever, for 3 hours before anybody else ever showed up at the White House. So I would show up before, he came down. I'd be there, a few minutes, or, I'd be there like an hour before he came down. I'd be listening to radio. I'd hear on the radio, mogul, moving to the elevator, right? So I'd be like, all right. So I'd get up. I'd walk to my door, stand into my doorway. He comes down the elevator. I'd see him there. And he'd walk out and I'd go, good morning, Mr. President. He's like, morning, Doc, right? Well, he's been up there for 3 hours, like getting spun up about whatever, right? He's looking for somebody to talk to, right? I'm the first person he sees. He'd walk over to me, like right off the bat, very first week. Doc, did you see this? Did you see that? I'd start talking to me about something on TV, right? Something that that was going on. And it had nothing to do with medicine, right? It might be Iran. It might be Stormy Daniels. I don't know. It's whatever, right? There's just whatever happened on TV, right? So he would tell me about this, and we'd start talking, and he'd be like, walk with me. So I'd just walk him to work. So I'd walk him down the West Colonnade, down the Oval Colonnade, walk into the back of the Oval Office, and we'd finish up our conversation, the National Security Advisor, the CIA briefer, the Chief of Staff, whoever would be in the outer oval waiting to come in and meet with him for his first meeting. I'd tie up my conversation, I'd walk out, they'd walk in, his day would start. And I just got in the habit of doing that like 3 out of 5 mornings, I'd walk him to work. So I got to know him really quickly. Like I really just fell in love with the guy. I was like, this guy's awesome, I love him, I loved his attitude, had a lot of respect for him. And he developed a lot of trust and confidence in me. So we like meshed immediately. And 6 months came, 6 months went, and I never even thought about leaving. So I ended up staying with him. So I stayed there for 3 years. And the only reason I got out was because I wanted to run for office, or I would have stayed the whole time. But the way I ended up deciding I was going to be a politician was, you may or may not remember, but Trump nominated me to be the Secretary of the VA, right? And that was brutal, man. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. Nobody else had seen anything like it at the White House. People were astonished. I tell people all the time, I got Kavanaugh'd before Kavanaugh did. I was the warm-up. I was the pregame. I just didn't know it at the time, right? And it's happened to a lot of people since then, but I was the first. They just tried to butcher me because I had the Trump stamp on me, which I'm proud to have. But once you get the Trump stamp on you, you're marked for destruction by the far left and by the progressive liberals, right? Marked for destruction. They'll destroy you, your family. They want to just destroy you completely, right? So anyways, all this stuff was going on, all these crazy accusations led by John Tester, and all these Democrats are coming. And so, you know, I'd never been exposed to it before. If I go through it now, I would have just stood my ground and just got confirmed. But I wasn't the person then that I am now. And the reason I am who I am now is because, you know, part of that. I mean, you know, experiences make you who you are. And that's what led to me, you know. And I was always strong-willed. I was always aggressive. I was always a hard charger, but I'd never been exposed to them. And they played their cards right. They knew what to do. They put me in a position where I couldn't talk about what was happening because I was active duty Navy still, and because, you know, I was a presidential appointee, and I, quote, had presidential privilege, and it wasn't about me anymore. It was about the privilege. And if I talked to them, I was going to screw everybody else, you know, that had presidential privilege, and set a precedent that was going to be horrible for the president and for everybody else in the mission. So they basically had boxed me in a situation where I felt like I couldn't talk about what was going on. So I was just getting butchered and couldn't even defend myself. And so anyways, I just, you know, at some point I told the president, I was like, look, this is becoming a major distraction. I'm withdrawing my nomination. He didn't want me to. He wanted me to stay. He's like, well, I don't want you to. And I said, I'm doing it. And I've talked to my wife, because my family was getting butchered too. I mean, they were setting up tripods at the end of my driveway. My wife and kids couldn't go to school. My wife couldn't go to the grocery store. If they pulled out, and they did chase my family down the street and knock on the windows in the car. I mean, they were harassing my family to death, right? So I said, I didn't sign up for this. So I ended up withdrawing my nomination. And Trump wanted me to stay, so he wanted me to go back to being his doc again. I want to do that because I'd already been doing that for 14 years. I was kind of looking for an exit strategy already on that. So I end up, he says, I want you to stay. I want you to be assistant to the president, my chief medical advisor. So I said, okay, which would mean I were working on policy stuff, not, you know, clinical stuff. So I said, okay, there'll be a nice break. But to be honest with you, my heart wasn't in it, right? I mean, I was just like, I hated DC at that point. I was like, I hate this place. It's a swamp. It's a sewer. Disgusting. I can't stand this place. I want to get out of here as soon as I can, right? I just couldn't stand it. My wife was the same way. So I kind of agreed to do it. So I stayed around for like 6-9 months doing this. And every day it was a little bit more of an uneasy feeling. I just didn't know where it was going to lead me or whatever. And then one day I turned the TV on and I saw Mac Thornberry, who had been the congressman for the 13th Congressional District for 26 years, right? And I don't know if anybody knows him or not. You know, he's a rhino. But anyways, he's gone now. But he'd been the congressman for 26 years there. And he announced, you know, just out of nowhere that he wasn't going to run again, right? So I was like, all right. So I just saw the TV one day and I was looking at that and I was like, you know what, man? I was like, this is crazy. I mean, I already had 20 plus years in the military, and I was talking about retiring, hoping to get my retirement paperwork done and get out pretty soon. I'd already kind of reached my terminal rank. It was back in October of 2019. And back then, everybody, I don't care who you were, it was the liberals, the conservatives, the press, everybody at that point thought Trump was getting reelected. It was a slam dunk, right? Because all the stuff you look at as far as indicators on whether a president's going to get reelected or not, the economy and everything else, through the roof, right? Everybody had already conceded like he's getting another term, right? Then COVID happened and all the garbage that followed COVID, right? And nobody saw that coming. But this is in October before COVID happened. So I thought, Trump's getting reelected. He's going to be back in the White House. I'm getting ready to retire. I'm getting out. This guy's retiring just south of or just north of where I grew up. I said, I could go up there and I could represent those folks up there without changing anything about who I am. Politically, socially, culturally, economically, I'm on the same page. And then I just had this epiphany. I thought, this is an unbelievable opportunity to get in the fight and do something about what's going on. Not talk about it, not bitch about it or anything, but do something about it, right? So I went to the White House that day and I was walking around. This is like 6 in the morning when I was getting ready to go to work. I walked around the White House all day and I thought about it. By the end of the day, I didn't even feel like it was an opportunity anymore. I felt like it was a duty to get in the fight and do something about it. So I walked straight into the Oval Office. The president was in there doing something. I walked straight past the Oval Secretary, unannounced, just walked into the Oval Office, said, sorry, I need you to stop what you're doing. I got to talk to you. He's like, yeah, what's going on, right? And I said, I'm leaving. And he's like, what? And he thought something happened to my family or something. He's like, you're leaving? And I said, yes, sir. And he goes, what happened? And I said, I'm running for office. He's like, what? Right? And so he's like, where? And he's like, so he was taken aback. And so I told him what I was going to do and everything. And he's like, Molly, get Brian Jack on the phone. He's this political, get him over here right now. And so Brian comes over and was talking and so on and so on. It just so happened that Rick Perry was in the outer oval with Anita, his wife, and their brand new grandbaby that they had. And he was getting a departure photo because he was getting ready to leave as Secretary of Energy. So they were outside. I told Rick what was going on my way in. And so Rick comes in the Oval Office and it's me in there and the president in there and Rick Perry and the chief of staff and the chief of staff's chief, the president's chief, Dan Scavino, Hope Hicks, Sarah Sanders, they're all in there, right? And everybody's in the Oval Office, and we're talking about this, and you know, by the time I left, I was like, I'm running. You know, and everybody agreed like I could do it, and I walked out. And when I walked out of the Oval that day, I was running. But I had to get out of the Navy first, because you can't even talk about running for office when you're in active duty. So I scrambled, right, and I had like literally like less than 4 weeks to get out of the Navy. And it usually takes 6 months to get out, right? You got to do all this paperwork, go to these classes, do all this other stuff. So I just happened to see the Secretary of Defense and the National Security Advisor walking out of the Situation Room the next morning at crossing West Executive Avenue, and I tracked them down. I said, hey, I yelled at them. They stopped. I told them, you know, that I was getting out and everything. They were like, that's awesome, whatever. And I said, but I need a favor. And I need you guys to help me with something. They're like, what do you need? And I said, I need to be out like in just a couple weeks. And they're like, whoa. They're like, you know, they're like, okay, well, you know, look, that's usually not doable. And I said, I need it. If I don't get out in the next couple weeks, I'm going to miss the filing deadline. I can't run. Right? So they said, okay, look, we'll do our best. We can't make any promises, but you get your paperwork. We promise we won't sit on it, right? We'll just push it around. We won't sit on it, right? I said, okay. We'll make sure nobody sits on it. I said, okay. So I got my paperwork ready, and I had it done by Wednesday morning, like 7 a.m. that Wednesday morning. A couple days later, I had everything ready to go. I submitted it, and I had retirement orders by Friday, close of business 3 days later, right? So anyways, be honest with you, they're ready to get rid of me anyways. But yeah, so I end up retiring, get out. Like I said, I got here, filed 2 hours before the filing deadline, and that's what led me here, right? But I'll tell you, you know, like I said, it changes everything, you know, the experiences you have and everything. And I think that's why I'm effective now as a member of Congress, and, you know, why I'm still in the fight, even though it's very frustrating, right? It's like you're in the military, you want something done, it just happens, especially if you're a flag officer. You're just like, half the time you don't even know you need it done. You know, somebody anticipates you need something done, and it's just done, right? And then you get into Congress, and it's just a dysfunctional mess, right? And nothing happens. Nothing gets done. It's just a colossal waste of time, right? But, you know, we have to change it, right? I mean, our country depends on fixing, you know, what's broken, even though right now we're not fixing much. But to be honest with you, one of the reasons I think I'm effective is because all of that stuff that happened to me, you know, in the way that things evolved, and the way that I went through that, you know, got butchered, me and my family got butchered, you know, with this VA nomination, everything led me here. Now I don't care. I do not care what they say about me. I could care less. I do not give a crap, right? And so, you know, I think that that's the attitude you have to be effective. You have to do your job, show up, and, you know, and one of the reasons I don't care is because I know that 95% of the people that I represent think exactly the same thing I do. So if I say or do something, the far left tries to butcher me and tear me up, and they say all kinds of horrible things about me. I don't care. I honestly don't even care anymore. I just do what I got to do and keep moving forward. And not everybody's like that in Congress, and I don't blame them, because not everybody got to Congress the same path that I took, right? But we got to get more people in Congress that are like that. I'll be honest with you, right? We just got to get people in that are wired like that. Trump's like that. I mean, I learned a lot of what I do from him, right? But anyways, I think that, you know, I'm on the Armed Services Committee right now. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm on the Ag Committee, and I'm on the Select Committee for COVID. But I've got 4 committees, pretty busy. Most people have 2. I got 4, so I'm pretty busy. But I got a big district, right? But I do everything I can, but, you know, it's just really frustrating. I mean, the first 2 years were really frustrating because we're in the minority, but it was easy to some extent. You just voted no on everything, right? Because it's all the garbage they were trying to push through, right? So it wasn't even debatable. Everybody in Congress that was on the Republican side just voted no. But now it's a lot more difficult because we're trying to actually get stuff done. We're trying to get stuff done with a 1-seat majority, which is really difficult, right? We're trying to get stuff done when the Democrats own the Senate and the Democrats own the White House, which that's the big problem for us, right? And you guys know as well as I do that the Republican Party in the House, we got some problems. I mean, you know, we have 2 or 3 people on the far right, you know, that want to say no on everything, no matter what. Which is, you know, I get it. You know, there's always a good reason to say no. It's spending, or it's something. There's something wrong with everything that comes through Congress. Nothing is perfect, right? So, you know, if you're looking for the perfect bill, you're never going to find it. You're always going to be there. But we have 2 or 3 people like that. But we have a handful of people on the far left, mainly our Republican congressman from New York, right, who are just, they might as well be Democrats, right? I mean, it's bad, right? I mean, they're a huge problem. So with a 1-seat majority, we're kind of we're kind of dead in the water right now, right? But we are trying to do stuff, but the vast majority of the party wants to move the ball forward and wants to, like, to defend our conservative, our conservative policies and values and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really matter, because sometimes when we pass something, we do pass things on occasion. It's a messaging bill, because it goes to the Senate and it just dies in the Senate, right? And we have some serious rhinos in the Senate, right? And I'm going to just tell you, like Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn. Yeah, I'm just telling you, we have rhinos in the Senate, right? And they stop everything good that happens in the House from going any further. And if it does, by chance, make it past the rhinos in the Senate and it goes to the White House, he vetoes it. Right? So it's a horrible situation right now. The only way we're going to fix it, we have to first and foremost, the absolute most important thing in the next election, more than anything out there, is to put Trump back in the White House. That is the #1 most important thing that we can do. We got to get Trump back in the White House, right? I think we're going to win the Senate because there's a whole bunch of Republicans, there's a whole bunch of Democrat seats that are having to be defended right now, not that many Republican seats. So just the odds are that we're going to end up getting the Senate. We're not going to have 60 or 60 plus, so we won't have a super majority in the Senate. You need 60 to pass, just about 60 votes out of 100 to pass just about anything that comes out of the Senate, right? So we're not going to get there. We probably won't have 60 seats, but we're going to have the majority, and we'll be able to control the agenda, and we'll be able to control what comes to the floor, so on and so forth. So and that's huge, right? And then the House, I don't know, man. I'm worried about the House, right? Because we're going to lose some seats in New York for redistricting, which I'll be honest with you, like I said, some of those people I'd just assume to be Democrats anyways, right? But we're going to lose a few seats in New York because of redistricting. We'll pick up a few seats in North Carolina because of redistricting, but it's going to be difficult to make a whole lot of progress. We'll be lucky, and I think we'll get there, but if we end up at the majority in the House, it's going to be close. It's going to be a small majority like we have now. Hopefully it'll be more than 1 seat, which is what we have right now, but even if it's 4 or 5 seats, that's still a small majority, right? But if we can get a small majority in the House, and we can get the Senate back, and we can get Trump in the White House, we can get stuff done, right? And the thing is, you can get stuff done with a small majority in the House if you have an effective leader in the White House, right? And, you know, as much as I hate her, Nancy Pelosi, you know, they got stuff done when they were there because nobody crossed her. I don't care what, every single member of that conference, they voted with her, right? And a lot of them didn't want to, but I don't know what kind of spell she put on them, you know, or what, you know, but if she said we're doing this, they all got in line and they did it, right? They did not question her. She was brutal. She was ruthless, right? And that's what we have to have in the House. And, you know, Kevin McCarthy, I mean, I like Kevin on a personal level, but, you know, I mean, he was a California Republican, so, I mean, and he's a politician, right? I like Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson's a great man. I mean, he's a good man, right? And he won't, you know, the one thing I know about Mike is he'll never lie to me, right? He's very honest, right? Which, you know, Kevin was more of a politician, but, you know, there were good things about Kevin, you know, compared to Mike. But Mike's a really good guy, but you know, he's being forged by fire right now, right? I mean, he's realized that, you know, this is nothing that he's ever been exposed to before. He's never been in a situation like this his entire life, and it's way more than he expected, right? So he's toughening up, but we've been rolled a few times over the last few months, right? Because they're taking advantage of him being new and inexperienced, right? Now he's learning quickly, and I'm hoping that, you know, that we're going to turn this around, but we got to get leaders in that are just, you know, I mean, you know, you know, just between us here, not for public dissemination or anything. Like I said, I respect the heck out of Mike Johnson. He's a good, honest man who wants to do the right thing. But you know what? The biggest mistake we made was not making Jim Jordan our speaker. I mean, Jim Jordan is our speaker. He is a bulldog. That guy would be, you know, just like Nancy Pelosi on the right. I mean, you would not cross him, right? We would get stuff done, and he would stand his ground with Mitch McConnell, you know, and with Schumer. They're one and the same, right? With those guys, and we would not let the Senate roll us on issues, right? But we're not there yet. But we're going to get there. So my point is that, you know, we've got our issues there. We're making progress. We're not anywhere close to where we need to be. This next election is going to be really determining how it all goes, right? I mean, I tell people all the time. I used to say this when I first started running, you know, and I thought it to be true. You know, the first time I ran, and you know, and I said, you know, hey, this election is the most important election of our lifetime, and I thought it was true. Yeah, it's not. This one's the most important election of our lifetime. If you look at what's gone on in our country and what's happened in our country, and you look back, if you had told me, right, if you had described to me what this country looks like right now, like 5 years ago, and you'd told me this is what this country looks like, I would have laughed. I would have said, you're crazy, right? And you would have said, why? And I said, because it's the United States of America. We're not doing that in the United States of America. It's not who we are. That would never happen in this country. And if you told me it did, it happened, I would tell you, you know what? It would take 30 years to get from where we're at now to there. It took 2 years. 2 years, Biden administration got us from where we were to where we are now. Can you imagine what's going to happen to this country if they get another 4 years and if that moron is running this country, right? It's going to be, we won't get it back. We will not be able to get this country back if he gets another 4 years, or if any progressive Democrat, or any Democrat for that matter, gets in the White House. I don't think we get this country back, right? So it's super important. And, and are they going to cheat again? Probably, right? I mean, they probably are, right? We're just going to have to come out in overwhelming numbers, and we're going to have to make it so uncomfortable for them that they can't cheat enough, to overturn the outcome. And I think we can do that, right? And I think that we have a little bit of advantage right now too, because there are a lot of people out there that are Democrats, right, or independents, that hate President Trump. They can't stand him. They have Trump derangement syndrome, right? They don't like the guy at all, but they are sick of what's happening in this country, right? They are sick of the crime. They're sick of the high prices. They're sick of, what's going on in Ukraine and the Middle East and everything else. And they're looking around and they're like, I don't like that guy, but my life was 1,000 times better when he was president, right? And so I think a lot of them are going to change and vote as Republicans, or they're not going to vote, right? And that's, I think, is a big advantage for us, right? Because I think that there's a lot of people out there that are just disgusted with him. And, the Republican Party is not like it used to be. I mean, it used to be the Republican Party, it used to be the Republican Party was, it was a party that people used to think it was a party of the elite. It's not anymore. The Democrats have two types of people in their party. They have the progressive elites, right? And they have the welfare state. That's it. They have nothing in between. Nothing. The Republican Party owns hardworking blue-collar people now, right? We own, every day we're getting an increasing number of Hispanics and blacks and these minorities groups that are coming in, right? Because they're sick of what's going on. And the Democrats want this, this progressive elite class where they tell everybody what to do and they look down their nose at everybody, and they want everybody else to be completely dependent on the government for everything they have, for their education, for their health care, for their housing, for their food, everything, right? And that's what they're doing with all these immigrants they're bringing in. They're bringing them in by the hundreds of thousands, by the millions, right? And they're not allowing them to work. And they're giving them everything that they need. And right, they want to do that on purpose because they want to get these people registered to vote somewhere down the road, and they want them to be completely dependent on the government for everything they have. So they have to keep voting for Democrats if they want to survive, right? And that's their goal. But anyways, I'm going to close it up here right now. It's getting close to the end. I'll answer a few questions or whatever, but I'm going to let it go at that. I could talk for 2 or 3 more hours about what's going on in D.C., but I know I've said enough here. So what I'll do, you want me to open it up for questions now? Yeah. Okay, that's the way government is supposed to work. You pass individual appropriations bills. We pass 14 appropriations bills. The Senate passes 14 appropriations bills. They all come together in conference. We come up with 14, appropriation bills that we all agree on. We pass that. That's based on whatever we passed earlier for our top line for the budget. That controls like how much we can spend in each of those appropriations bills. That's how it's supposed to work. That hasn't happened in forever, right? Because now we work, the way government works now is all we do is continue resolution, continue resolution, continue resolution till we get to the end of the year, and then omnibus, right, which is this massive spending bill, right, that has all kinds of extra spending. They cram it down everybody's throat at the very end. So what we'll do, the reason we can't do that is because what will happen is they will pass, they won't take the bill that we send them. We can do that, and we would, and we'll send it over, and even if we pass it out of the House, which is hard to do, but we get it out of the House, we get it over to the Senate, they won't take it. The Senate will take it, and they'll change it, right, and they'll strip out all the conservative stuff in there. They'll strip out H.R. 2. They'll put in some other garbage that they call the Border Security Bill, which is what they're doing right now, and they'll get it and they'll send it back over to us, right? Then the funding deadline gets really close, and the government's about to shut down, right? And you and me and everybody else is going, shut it down. I don't care. I'm sick of this. Shut it down. I don't care, right? But guess what happens? All the Democrats vote for it, and 5 New York Republicans vote for it, and it passes. Right? And that's what happens. We pass stuff out of the House, out of a Republican House with a majority of Democrat votes, because eventually they get, it's not just the New York guys, there's other people in there too, the people that have been there for 30 years that are appropriators and things like that, but there's enough Republicans, all of the Democrats or most of the Democrats will vote for it, and there's more than enough Republicans to get rid of the Democrats and pass whatever comes back from the Senate. Then we're done. That's what's going to happen. So we're coming up, we have 2 deadlines coming up. One is March 1st and one is March 8th, because we took the appropriations bill, split them in half somehow or another. They usually stay together. We split them in half and put them out, and we give them 2 separate deadlines. Those are coming up. And then there's another deadline that comes up. I think it's March 15th or something. So what we're going to do is we'll come back, because we haven't been working on any of these appropriations bills since we passed the last CR, right? We just we passed the CR. We forget about it. We start passing stupid stuff and just wasting our time up there, which is what we do. Then we come back, and they're going to expire this time. Then there's going to be a mad dash to get another CR that carries us to this April deadline. Now the issue is that we passed a bill at the very beginning of the year that said that if we do a CR, a continuing resolution in April, that it's, and this is already in law, this is signed off. This is the one good thing that Kevin McCarthy did. He worked it, he got it past the House and Senate, and the President signed it, because they got other stuff out of it too, right? But what it says is that if we have a continuing resolution after this date in April, I think it's April 12, April 15, I can't remember, but if we have a continuing resolution after this date, everything in the government takes a 1% cut, right? Which is a lot of money, right? And so people are freaking out, right? So what's going to happen is they're not going to let that happen. They don't care about this CR. They didn't care about the last CR. They care about the one in April, because the one in April, there's a massive cut to everybody, right? Everybody across the board gets cut. So what they're going to do is they'll scramble. They'll come up with, you know, Mike Johnson said he will not bring an omnibus to the floor. He promised that. What they're going to do is they're going to take those 2 appropriations packages, make 2 minibuses, right? Same thing, 2 minibuses. And they're going to send those over to the House from the Senate, right? With all of this extra spending, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to drive our debt up even more. And they're going to vote on it. All the Dems will vote for it. A bunch of Republicans will vote for it. I won't vote for it. A lot of my colleagues won't vote for it, but it'll pass.
If you can't convince Jim Jordan to be the speaker, is there anybody else?
Well, Jim wants to be the speaker. I mean,
he does
yeah.
now.
No, Jim put his name in the hat, but I don't know. Some of the Republicans in our party tore it down, so he didn't get it. He couldn't get the 218 votes. It was 218. He couldn't get the 218 votes. It got close, but he couldn't get 218. So there were 5 or 6 people that went through that process and couldn't get there. And eventually, Mike Johnson was the first one that could get 218 votes.
I was under the impression that he did not want.
Well, he didn't want it initially, but you know, I mean, we talked him into it, and so he put his name in the hat. And
he didn't speak to that though, because he didn't want it, because if he took that seat, he got removed from one of the committees.
Well, he didn't want to give up his seat. He didn't want to give up his spot as chair of the judiciary, right? Because he's the one that's going after the FBI and the DOJ and the weaponization of government. He's doing awesome things. So he didn't want to, and a lot of us didn't want to see him give that seat up. But honestly, like being the speaker is much more influential across the board. So we talked him into it, and he said, "I'll do it," and he came in. But there was a lot of hard feelings with people that had ran before with Scalise and some of the the doctor that took care of him worked for me. He's his doctor now. He's not a good guy, but he worked for me for 8 years. And I saw Biden on a regular basis. I see him all the time in and around the West Wing. He's way different now. I mean, you know, he may have had a window of opportunity to run for president and be president. And he still would be a horrible president probably, but he would be cognitively not as cognitively impaired as he is now, at least. But so he was different then. Like I would say, the best way I can describe it, he was still stupid, but he wasn't cognitively impaired, right? Now he's stupid and cognitively impaired, which is a bad combination, right? So, but anyways, he's degenerated a lot. And so if you go back and you look at videos from him when he was vice president and watch him talk now, it's astonishing. You're like, oh my gosh, right? Yeah.
Sir, I don't have time to go through all the issues, but I would say that your last couple of minutes, when you were describing what's happening with the immigrants, illegals, et cetera, that are coming over, everything you mentioned is basically a pattern to continue to socialize into a socialistic situation in America. Many would say, you know, and we've lost the language, and we're losing the history. It has really puzzled me for many years why Republicans will not ever let someone describe themselves as a progressive without immediately saying, no, you're regressive, and you're regressive for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. So I think that we've lost it a bit there where we could use that word regressive. And you've got the capability, and I don't know whether it's feasible or not, but with you, when Johnson went to the border and had 40 or 50 or so people standing behind him, if he were to pick the top 6 to 12 individuals, and you might be the actual spokesperson, pick the top 24 markets in America and make a commitment to fly to them, put on a press conference and have some of these issues which you lay out and in some way push past the media and to get the message. I know it's a big re-education challenge, but it seems to me like there's something within the PR world that we could do that would shake the tree just a bit, including not letting a progressive carry that label. He or she are regressive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's just because I've been in politics for a while now, for 3 years or whatever, but I think the term progressive, even though they pushed it initially as something good, I think it's become a very negative term. I mean, when you say progressive, but yeah, I mean, I refer to them as progressive sometimes, but they're not socialists, they're communists and Marxists now. I mean, they are, they're communists and Marxists. And, so yeah, I get it, we should, but the thing about the PR, I'm all about that. It is incredibly hard to do that because the media they are nothing more than the communications department for that party, for the progressive, communist, Marxist, folks that are running this country. They work for them, right? And unless you happen to be, Fox News, which is even sometimes, like I can't stand Neil Cavuto and people like that. I mean, they're part of the problem, right? But Fox traditionally, and still some on Fox, we'll push the narrative that needs to be out there about what's happening in this country. Newsmax and places like that do, but the vast majority of the people in this country get their information from social media, from somewhere, from TikTok or something like that, and they control those too. They control Facebook, they control all of that stuff, right? So it's traditionally been very hard to get that stuff out, and not only that, but they have all these algorithms where if you put stuff out, they just suppress it. If you Google my name right now, I could cure cancer tomorrow, and you would have to go through 15 pages on Google to find that I cured cancer, because all there would be all the garbage stories that they've generated about me over the last 5 years. They have algorithms that keep that stuff at the top, and you have to go way down, if you can even find it, to find anything good that I've done. The same thing with every Republican, right? They control the media. So we got to fix that too. And we're not going to fix it until there's so many fundamental problems here. It's not just the media, it's the brainwashing of our kids. We knew they were doing it in the university system forever. Not a lot of these are coming out. They're where the journalists are coming from now. They've been brainwashed by the time they get out, right? They don't think this is the best country in the world to live in anymore, right? They've never been anywhere else, and believe me, I've been to 130 different countries. I know this #1 best place in the world to live, but they don't know that. They badmouth our country all the time. You can see what they're doing. And now we find out after COVID, that wasn't just going on our university system, it's happening in our primary education, right? We see the curriculum they have. So we got to fix it. We got to fix it from the bottom up, man. We got to start changing what's being taught to our kids. We got to start getting conservatives graduated from high school and from college, and we got to get those people in to these jobs in the media. And, is it too late? I don't know. It's, you see how rapidly things are changing, but yeah, I agree with you. If we can do that, I'm all in.
Okay, going back to the first question about shutting down the border, or shutting down the CR, the problems with getting that through the Republicans' caucus. Is there any way to get some leverage on the Republicans that would vote with the Democrats through offering them more campaign financing, something that would get them to change their votes so that vote will shut down the government? Because that's what really has to happen. You guys control the money. You really control the money. People don't say it.
Right. Well, that's true. We control the purse strings. That's another big frustration. We don't use that, right? We don't use the ability that we have to control the purse strings, right? And we should be, right? But yeah, I don't know. I think that there's just there's a lot of one of the big problems is that I see things a certain way because I've never been in politics before, and I've only been there for a couple years now, right? And I see things, and and I get out, and I've come from a district where all of you see what's going on, right? But there are a bunch of people in Congress. Some of them even mean well, but they've been there for so long. They're out of touch with what's going on in this country anymore, right? And they only know one way to do things, and that's the way things have always been done, right? And we ceded a lot of our authority to the executive branch over the last 20 or 30 years Congress has, right? We got to get some of that back. But we do still have control of the purse strings. We don't utilize it like we should. And we've been jumping up and down. We've been trying to we sent stuff over we sent Israel funding over, right? We said, okay, we're gonna put together a supplemental package to give $14 billion to Israel, right? And so all of us in the House that are conservatives, we said, we're gonna vote for this, but it's gonna be a pay for. We're gonna take $14 billion away from the IRS, right? That they used to fund those 87,000 new IRS agents that the Dems passed when they still controlled the House and the Senate, right? When I was in the minority. So we said, we're gonna take $14 billion from that and we're gonna give it to Israel. So you know, they should have bought off on that, right? They should have supported that, especially the Democrats that say they're pro-Israel, but they wouldn't, right? So we always trying to find pay-fors, but the problem goes back to the exact same thing. It's always a group of people that come from districts that are very purple, right? That are right on the precipice, and if they lose 1,000 votes in this way or that, they lose the election, right? So they're always catering to the left in their district, right? And then I'm talking about the New York guys and people like that. Some of the California representatives are always catering to the left so that they can come back next term, right? You have that combined, you know, with you know, some of these people that just you know, are used to the way things have always been, and they can, you know, there's always enough once they make the package palatable to the Democrats will, like I said, they'll get together and they'll all vote for something, and we have a 1-seat majority. So if they get 2 or 3 Republicans, they can win, right? And there's always 2 or 3, and it's usually even more than that are out there that just are willing to side with the Democrats to spare themselves the potential for getting beat in the next election because they're in a tough district, right? Yeah, and I don't know how to get past that. I mean, you know, and yeah, I'm not going to give up. Yeah.
Ronny, do you ever sit in a meeting, or do you know anyone of gravitas that is seriously concerned about $35 to $38 trillion of debt? Does anyone ever give any consideration to what that means?
There are a handful of members they're consumed by it. That's all they think about, right? But the problem is most other people don't think about it. It's not their money, right? But down of it every day. I get it every single day, right? Tom Massey, right, wears a debt clicker on his pocket every day, right, which is clicking down the debt, right? So there are people out there that are concerned about it, and we'll have meetings and we'll talk about this spending, and there'll be people that get up and go like, we got to give this $60 billion supplemental to Ukraine, right? Because if we don't do this, Russia's going to win, and if they win, they're going to come after Poland and come after Romania and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, and we're going to be in a war because we're part of NATO. And we got to spend this $120 billion for this supplemental for Ukraine, or else we're going to be in a war, right? And that's what it's saying. And then people get up, you know, they get in line, they get the mic, you know, and we're doing open mic in our conferences, and they're like, we don't have 120. You know, do you guys know what's going on? Like, you know, and they try to basically make the case for why we can't do that. We don't have the money, right? We way overspent. And not only that, but, you know, the problem that we have right now is that even when we're talking about $120 billion going to Ukraine, that's really nothing compared to what's going on with our debt with the $34 trillion, right? And, you know, we're at the first time, this is the first time ever, we crossed this line last year where we are now paying more interest on our debt than we are for our entire budget in DOD, right? So we spend more money on interest than we do on our entire military. That is a recipe for disaster, right? But the problem, here's the biggest problem. The only way that we get control of our debt is to cut mandatory spending. Mandatory spending is Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, right? And so when you start talking about those, people start losing their freaking minds. But until we cut or reform mandatory spending, our debt is out of control, because 85% of every dollar we spend is mandatory spending, not discretionary spending like defense spending and spending on ag and all these other things, right? So, you know, and David makes this point all the time. He goes, do you people understand that we can sit up here and have debates all day long about discretionary spending? If we don't do something about mandatory spending, it doesn't matter, right? And so it's, you know, I mean, it's a bad situation.
Congressman Jackson introduced myself earlier. I'm South African originally, just like Elon Musk. And so I just wanted to comment that you were shocked within 5 years how much we've regressed. I'm here to tell you that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
My country
Speaking from experience, yeah. Exactly. There's a lot of folks I talk to from other countries, and they see what's happening. They're like, you guys cannot let this happen. I've lived through this. Don't do it, right?
Exactly. Don't give up your guns no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, that ain't.
I might have an unorthodox question, but your background as a Navy diver, I just wanted to ask, might not be appropriate to ask, but do you think our capabilities as a Navy diver, we were able to bomb the Nord Stream pipeline and sabotage that whole.
Yeah, I think we have the capability. I know we have the capability. So, you know, as far as did we do it, I can't definitively say, you know, who did that. But yes, we have the capability to do that. We have the capability to do that. The Russians have the capability to do that. Pretty much nobody else.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Who said Tucker did it last time?
Who what? Oh, yeah, Putin said, yeah, I saw that, yeah. Who did it? And he's like, me?
Do we have any other questions?
I have a clarification because I heard something today and I was like, well, I'm going to have to come back to that because I was in the middle of something. You know, like when you're listening to a podcast and you're like, what did he just say? Okay. Okay, so coming up, we talked about House majority. So I heard today on a podcast that if we don't keep the House, remind me of the timeline of when all of y'all get certified, put back in, speakers put back in between certification of the president. Because he says if we don't keep the House, then we don't have the right speaker, and then which means that screws up the certification. So there's something to that. Do you know?
You know, it could be. I mean, so what we have in the House, we have to get elected every 2 years, all 435 members.
Right.
Every single member of the House gets elected every 2 years. The Senate, they get elected every 6 years, and it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So, right, so at any given time, there's about 1/3 of the Senate that's up for re-election and all of the House. So we will get elected in November. You know, that's when the House, and the 1/3 of the Senate that's up for re-election, you vote on House and Senate members. You also vote on president then, right? And then if we go back and we don't have the majority when we go back in, then we show up for, you know, we convene with the next Congress, like the 3rd or the 4th or something of January, right? And then the president comes in and inauguration day is on the 20th of January. So about 2 weeks after the House and the Senate get back, there's going to be a new speaker, right? And there'll be a new president coming in. The speaker will be elected immediately after the House gets back. So when the president gets inaugurated, there will be a new speaker, maybe a new speaker from us if we keep the majority. Could be Mike Johnson, could be somebody else. Or if the Dems get the majority back, then it'll be Keem Jeffries will be the speaker.
So, and I can't remember if it was Schiff or one of those lovely people that had made the leading comment about what was going to happen if we didn't have the House because we won't have the speaker, and that's going to cause problems with certification.
I'm sure they will. You know, as much as they you know, threatened me and hated on me because I didn't vote to certify the vote because it was unconstitutional, right? And they told everybody it was unconscionable that I wouldn't, you know, that I would do that. They'll do it. You know, as soon as they get the opportunity, they've done it before. You know, there's a lot of them total hypocrites. They've done it, you know, in elections past. Yet I was doing it for a legitimate reason because it was unconstitutional. Because Constitution says that the state legislatures in every state control the conduct, the timing, and everything regarding the election, right? And we had 4 or 5 states where county clerks and judges and, you know, anybody else that happened to show up was changing election rules and election laws 2 weeks before the election, right? You can't do that. That's against that's unconstitutional, right? So anyways, but yeah.
I just want to clarify because I want to make sure people aren't just focused on Trump, but we're focused on.
No, we gotta win it all. I mean, Trump can do a lot, and he will do a lot, but he can do a lot more if he's got you know, people supporting him, people behind him, people that have his back. And if he loses the House, it's going to be an uphill battle. Yes, sir.
You think Biden will make it until November?
No, he's not going to be the nominee. It's over. I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. But I think what happened with the Her report, I think it was engineered. I think that the Obama team is behind that, right? I think that they realized this guy cannot win the election. He can't. Right? And they have 2 choices. They have to let this election go and start planning for the next one, or they have to do something drastic and try to get a new nominee. So I think they're going to try to get a new nominee, and I think that they let this happen because, you know, that guy, he works for the Attorney General, for Merrick, right? For Merrick Garland, right? That's who he works for, right? So he works for the Obama DOJ, right? They appointed him, right? So for them, for the Attorney General to let this guy put the report out with all of the negative stuff about his cognitive stuff in there. Like he didn't get charged, which is good for him, right? But all that stuff is a big political hit for him, right? That was calculated. They let that happen. Somebody engineered that and let that happen because that's the first nail in this coffin. That's the shot over the bow, and they're trying to get him to tell the American people that he will finish this term, but he's not running again, right? And so they can put somebody else in at their convention, right? That's what they're going to do. Who's it going to be? I don't know. They have a real problem right now because the first person that should be next in the breach, next in the hopper, is Kamala Harris, right? She's the vice president. She's on the ticket with him. So if they get rid of him, she's going to make the case immediately, and usually it would be rightfully so. I'm the sitting vice president. I'm on the ticket with him. If he can't do it, I'm the nominee, right? And under normal circumstances, they would do that. But they hate her as much as they hate him, right? I was telling somebody the other day, he's got cognitive issues related to his age. She was born that way, right? She was a box of rocks, right? But so what can you do about that? She's a black female, right? And she would be the first black female president. This is a party who doesn't do anything that's not related to identity politics. So how can they disqualify a person who would potentially be the first black female? There's only one way you can do that. You find another black female to take her place. That's basically it. So I don't know who that's going to be. Your guess is as good as mine. I hope not, but yeah.
Okay, last question on hold.
Yes, sir.
If we get all of them, the Senate, House, and the White House, what do you think is going to happen with the cleanup of the DOJ and the FBI?
Oh, I think it depends on who, and he will be our nominee. If it's President Trump, it's going to be bloody. It's going to be brutal, right? It's going to be brutal, right? And that's why we got to have him, because he's the only one that's going to have the guts to do it. He does not care, right? He's lived this. He's been subjected to the deep state for years and years now. They've tried, we all know this, they've tried everything they could possibly do to just destroy this man. They want to put him in prison. They would kill him if they could. They really would, right? They say how much they hate him, right? So he's the only one that's going to go in. He has nothing to lose. He's not got another term after this. He's going to go in and lay waste to these places, right? He's going to go into every department and he's going to cut them by 1/3, and he's not going to do it randomly. He's going to find the 1/3 of these career employees that are acting as if they're political appointees, and he's going to get rid of them. And I'm going to help him do it.
We just had one of these in Dallas with Beth Van Dyke.
Yeah.
And man, they grilled her. So you got off really easily tonight. Y'all have been great. But I would really encourage at this point, if you want to wrap up with a minute or so, that would be great if you want to. Otherwise, if you guys would please, and if you have time, take a picture with him in front of our True Texas Project sign and get it on social media and help us spread the word about getting out. So.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. First off, I just want to say thank you again, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it. Help me help you by making sure that we keep this part of our district, Denton and Denton County, as red as we can possibly get it. Get the vote out. I mean, I'll do anything I can to help you, but this is where the front line of the fight's at in 13th Congressional District right here. So we got to make sure we're doing it. I'll do everything I can on my end. I see President Trump on a regular basis. I'm going to be with him tomorrow night. I was with him last weekend, and I will let him know that I was here and that he's got a lot of, he knows it, but I'll just reiterate to him that he's got a lot of support. I tell people all the time, I hate DC. I can't stand the place, right? It'll bring you down. In DC, when I walk around in DC, most people there, they see me, oh, that's Ronny Jackson, right? They would just as soon spit on me as say hi to me, right? I mean, they really would. They despise me there. And if that was what I had to deal with every day, all day long, I'd just be like, it's not worth it. But the only reason I stay in the fight is because I come back home to the 13th Congressional District and people like you pat me on the back and tell me thank you and tell me I'm doing a good job. Otherwise, I could not do it. So thank you. I appreciate your support and everything that you do. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.